Do you sometimes wonder if it is possible to work on things like self-esteem while you are dating? Or do you sometimes take breaks from dating for longer than you even want to because you're worried that you need to be perfectly healed before you enter relationships with other people? We're going to talk about that in this episode, how to work on these things while being in the dating market. And a lot of these tips would apply even if you're in a committed relationship or if you're not currently looking, because a lot of these tips are simply about learning to be true to yourself and staying authentic while in connection with other people. So if you're part of the immersion crew and you listen every week, I think you can still learn something from this, whether you're actively dating or not. We're going to look at 4 different principles. And for each, we'll look at a story and see what is a person doing in that situation, and then what would they ideally do instead, and the deeper psychological principles at play. Because it's really annoying when people say something like, don't attach your self-worth to how you're doing in the dating market. Yeah, sure, sounds great, but you know what? Rejection still stings. So we're going to go deep like we always do here. Welcome to Immersion. I'm your host, Pamela, and here we explore psychology and philosophy topics to find meaning in the modern world. Let's dive in. So the first principle is the idea of not needing a specific outcome. Being okay if things don't work out. Realizing that you are more than okay single. This is something like we've talked about. All of these principles sound great as a mantra, and heck, sometimes they can just help to remember when we find ourselves getting overly invested to realize, you know what, I want this to work out. I don't need this to work out. But for when that's not enough, let's peek underneath that. Let's imagine 2 people meet on a date, Amanda and Stacy. And Amanda says that she is not looking for anything serious, but Stacy is looking for a committed relationship. If Stacy had the idea that she doesn't need this to work out, that she'll be okay, she could walk away after that and say, you know what, this isn't what I'm looking for. But that is often not what happens. Often someone in Stacy's position will say, maybe I can change them. Maybe if I'm entertaining enough and beautiful enough and just show them that we can be great together, then they'll change their mind. I mean, we had so much chemistry on that first date. And often, almost everything that we're going to talk about here is happening subconsciously. I don't think that Stacy is always actively thinking, maybe I can change them. She might just be trying pretty hard, thinking, what is the exact right outfit to wear on this date? So the deeper tip here is to explore your attachment style. Attachment styles are the psychological frameworks that help inform how we connect with other people, how we navigate conflict, if we believe that relationships are emotionally safe. And this has to do with how attuned our primary caregivers were to our emotions and needs. There are 4 attachment styles. One is secure. You believe that love comes freely. You don't have to work for it. It also won't smother you, that attaching comes easily to you. Then there is anxiously attached, where you believe you need to do a lot to keep connection. There is avoidant attachment, where you get afraid that love will be too much and smother you, so you pull away to come back to yourself at certain intervals. And then lastly, there's disorganized attachment, where someone has anxious and avoidant patterning. So as you can see, only one of those leads to easy connections, but we can work on our attachment style. So for instance, in this case, we don't know if Amanda has avoidant attachment. Amanda might be securely attached and just be looking for something casual right now, casual connection. But Stacy, if she is anxiously attached, might go into that overfunctioning, trying to keep connection, rather than what a secure person might do. And I mean secure both in terms of sure, being confident in themselves, but in this case, securely attached. That person will say, oh, this doesn't feel good. I don't want this. I'm going to go find someone that will give me the love that I want and deserve. One last note on attachment styles actually came from a question from a listener. They were curious if some of their dysfunction in relationships, like escaping into fantasy, not being able to form connections with other people, if it came from limerence and that obsessive thinking, the idealization, all of the things we talked about in the last couple episodes on limerence, or if it has to do with their attachment styles. I mentioned to them that we go into limerence because we have an insecure attachment style. So those things are connected. And as we work on our attachment style, we will be less likely to go into limerent fantasies. And I'm going to link a couple resources on attachment styles down below as well in case you want to dive deeper. Okay, principle number 2, boundaries, standards, and remembering that you are also the chooser. When we are single and about to start dating again, often we'll come up with a list of our non-negotiables, our boundaries, our standards. And for instance, that could have applied in the prior example. If someone really wants a committed relationship, going after someone that doesn't want that could be something that doesn't fit your current standards. But they could also include things such as empathy, or I really want someone that has a similar level of drive as I do, or someone who is curious about me and who asks questions about me on the date instead of talking about themselves the entire time. And then often boundaries are adjacent to this, and that's just saying what you will and won't tolerate, what you need. So for instance, when I started dating again, one boundary that I expressed is that I am not on my phone all the time. So I did not want to do a ton of texting between early dates. And the person can either accept that boundary or not accept that boundary. If for them, texting all day and getting quick responses is important to them, then we just would not be compatible. But it's very easy to, once we start dating, give up the things that we originally said are really important to us to try to keep connection, to try to make it work. Now, we're going to go deeper on why we do this in a second, but let's look at an example. Let's imagine that a man named Jason, who really values empathy and has that as a non-negotiable for what he wants in relationships, ends up with a woman named Melanie. And Melanie, from certain hurt in the past, can come across in a really intense way. So in their first argument that they have after about 2 months of dating, Melanie kind of puts up a bit of a wall, and she wants to have really firm standards, and she ends up coming across kind of cold in this argument. And Jason feels zero empathy coming back towards him, and he starts to shut down himself, and the fight sort of spirals and goes downhill from there. They do decide to come back together and reconnect the next day, but Jason sort of has a weird taste in his mouth now because he has seen this other side of Melanie. So what should Jason do next? Because he feels a little bit like he's compromising on his standards that he set, what he was really looking for. What he can do is evaluate the line between perfectionism, looking for a perfect person, because maybe Melanie actually is empathetic in other moments. This just triggered something in him where he got scared, like, oh, maybe this isn't the person I thought they were. He starts overanalyzing, something we're going to talk about later. Or maybe he picked up on something that is true about her. He just kind of couldn't put his finger on it until certain moments, that she really is being so self-protective a lot of the time that she really cannot be in a space to feel for him. If he stays in that relationship, he can be in his body, be in his feelings, see over time with multiple data points how this person reacts and how he feels in the relationship. Something that we often do is we stay very conceptual and in our head, sort of trying to gather a case about this person. Did this happen? Does it mean why? Instead of just constantly asking, how do I feel around them? How do I feel after I'm with them? Do I feel more like my ideal version of myself that I want to be? Am I starting to get more and more relaxed over time? Or do I feel like I'm constantly walking on eggshells or trying to be what they want? And the reason why I say multiple data points is, again, with this sort of looking for certainty, perfectionism, over analyzing mindset, often we can take one piece of data and then extrapolate so many things that it means instead of just continually being with them and seeing the relationship unfold over time. If we've been hurt before, we can kind of work overtime to try to not be hurt again. So principle 3 is detached curiosity, lowering the stakes, and asking simply, do I want to see them again? A lot of these principles are connected. We're trying to not forecast to the future too much. So often, if we've been hurt, we're looking for safety and security in another person. We're thinking, could this person be safe? Could this person provide me with whatever I'm missing in my life? Whether that is a spark of kind of like a pick-me-up, not necessarily entertainment, but a boost? Could they provide me, again, that security and safety, whether that's emotionally, whether that's physically, whether that's financially? Look for things that you're missing in your life and ask, am I dating to try to find someone that will fill these things? Or am I dating as an imperfect but whole human, aiming to find another imperfect but whole human, where we come together because we want to be together, not because we feel we need to be together? It's the difference between love and a certain grasping attachment energy, which is connected to the limerence episodes we just did. Limerence is often about that needing, that seeking validation in the other, versus who do I like to spend my time around? Or as Heidi Priebe says, who asks the kinds of questions in life that I find interesting as well? Or as Nietzsche says, marriage is a long conversation. Who do you want to be in a long conversation with? Or across a 50-year marriage, have 36,500 dinners with? See, that's the thing, is it is an important choice, but we can't come in with it with that mindset. Because the vast majority of the time, this first date is not going to turn into a marriage. But we're constantly evaluating who we're across from through that light. We hear about their relationship with their niece and nephew, and then sometimes our brain starts thinking, oh, they're good with kids. That probably means they want kids. Good, I want kids too. And we start evaluating. Some of this is normal. I mean, if you were on a date and completely didn't notice things like, oh, this person got completely hammered and then started saying some really disturbing things, yeah, maybe you decide to not see that person again. But a lot of this goes back to being in your feelings and that presence moment to moment. We miss things about how we feel about the other person if we're analyzing. That's the kind of ironic part, is we think, oh, I'm safe if I'm looking ahead and analyzing. Actually, that's when we miss the most. The relationships that I see that I admire the most, I often talk to them about how it felt when they got together, what they were looking for. And a lot of times these people actually analyzed the least. They would just say things like, I liked spending time with them more than anyone else, and I realized I kept wanting to see them again. Or I liked how I felt around them. I felt really at peace. Or one couple I know that I think is amazing together, actually, it just started as incredible physical chemistry, but they just really liked spending time together. And then admittedly, some jealousy kind of snuck into the mix, and they realized that they just wanted to see each other. So there are so many ways it can start, but often it does not start with really, really high stakes. Because again, the chances are on any first date that this is probably not your person. But the only way to know if they are, ironically, is to not think about them as your potential person and just be with them as a human. Often people talk about really great relationships starting as friendships. Often people think, well, that's great, especially if you met in college and you got to be friends first. But what if you're meeting on the apps? You can approach it as if, not say like we're friend zoning people on the apps when clearly you're there to date. I've just heard it expressed that you can sort of get to know this person platonically, meaning you're not over investing too soon. And lastly, to kind of bring this tip home, with detached curiosity, you can keep thinking of this person as someone that you do not know. So instead of searching for the perfect person and the perfect certainty right away, instead keep thinking, I wonder about this, I wonder about that, and seek to get to know them and let them surprise you over time. And as more experiences happen and as more feelings come up, you will know what's right for you, particularly if you're present with reality. And that's why we're going to do an episode later in this series on the somatic awareness that we can develop, where we can be more in our body, not only in relationships, but in general, because that's something that a lot of people need who struggle with self-worth or trauma or any of the things that have been coming up in this series. But the takeaway here is that often if you're trying to analyze your way into a safe relationship, you might miss what is actually a safe or unsafe relationship because you're not really in that connection. You're too afraid to experience it. So you're sort of viewing it from the outside. It's almost like watching your life from inside your head versus being in it. So the next principle is taking breaks when you need them, but also staying in the game when you want to be in the game. And just to clarify, no, I don't mean playing toxic dating games. I mean staying on the field of your own life instead of benching yourself. Things will come up that hurt. Let's look at an example. Maybe you went on 5 dates with someone that you felt really strongly about. You saw this probably turning into a relationship, not because you're future forecasting like we talked about, but because it just felt like it was heading there. Then you get a text that they're just not feeling the same romantic connection and that they want to stop seeing each other. This can sting so much. And it stings in a different way compared to maybe a first date you were really looking forward to that seemed promising that didn't pan out because you started to really invest in this person. So there's a couple paths that someone could take. Someone could just have this very knee-jerk reaction that they're going to take a significant amount of time off, completely delete the apps, and maybe take 6 months on the bench, which is fine if that is what you want. But I know some people that really want a partner and they take a lot of time off dating. I would get curious if there's ways to take care of yourself while you stay in the game. Like maybe it's a 2-week break instead of a 6-month break. Maybe you find that even just a weekend of some incredible nourishing self-care, giving yourself all the things that you want and need, home cooked meals, time with a book, time with your best friend, cuddles with a dog, time in the sunshine, a little bit of extra sleep and workouts, and getting back to some things you're really passionate about, like volunteering or an art project, and you just pour into yourself. You listen to the sad songs and you let yourself cry and you take a slightly longer hot shower. And I'm sure there's more. Let me know in the comments some of your favorite ways to take care of yourself in the face of disappointment. Wow, that is not the most fun question for YouTube. I'd say let me know other principles you can think of in the comments because there are so many there too. Let's do that instead. You can let us know either. And for everything I'm talking about here, we need to have compassion with ourselves when we fall into old patterns. We will fall into old patterns. These are things we learned in childhood often. These are things we learned in early relationships we had. So have so much compassion as you start to have this awareness of noticing, oh, that's a thing I do. Sometimes you fall back into it. That's okay. Sometimes you apply mindfulness and you do a new behavior, which feels weird at first, but then slowly we strengthen that new neural pathway and it is possible. And one disclaimer that I want to add here is I am not talking about continuing to date, repeating the same old patterns over and over again, where you're going to just feel reminded that relationships are painful or incorrectly take in the message that you are not meant for them. This is where it is so helpful to do this while in therapy. If you cannot be in therapy due to finances, then reading books on things such as attachment theory, listening to podcasts, maybe even by therapists. I can try to link a couple down below on things like complex trauma and healing from that, working on building relationships in a healthy way. I've been mentioning this regularly. There's sometimes more affordable group therapy options. That way you're getting feedback from the outside, people that tell you, oh, maybe you're doing that thing again that you mentioned last week when you didn't even realize it. Because then we'll be going into these new situations with our eyes wide open. As you form these new relationships, you will have what is called corrective experiences, where your brain starts to predict that things will go one way, such as, oh, I can't say that, I can't disagree with them, or there will be a conflict. But then maybe you're met with something different. Maybe you're met with kindness or curiosity. Then your brain starts to actually change how you view your experiences and relationships with others. And you start to then realize, oh, relationships can be safe if they're the right relationships. So isn't that amazing that we can actually find healing in relationship, which goes back to the question of, can you work on healing in relationships? The answer is not only can you, but often it's the only way to work through certain attachment wounds is to do it in connection with others. It's just about finding the right, safe others and working on ourselves too, because we kick up things in them. I think something I used to often do is only look outward and think, what are they kicking up in me? Instead of realizing this is a two-way street and I am kicking up certain things in them. And how can I be a safe place for them? And the last thing we can do to stay grounded and centered through this is to maintain all of the things that are important to us, whether that is a spiritual practice, a workout routine, time with your loved ones, time learning about your field, whatever the things are that you did before that made you feel like yourself, maintaining those now, even though that can be difficult to do. Unfortunately, we often end up morphing into what will work in a certain relationship, which means giving up parts of ourselves. So we don't do this intentionally. We just start watching the kinds of movies they like to watch because it's easier and we can go with the flow. We maybe stop our exercise routine because we want to see them more often. We stop talking about topics that we find interesting or light us up inside because this other person might not find it interesting. There's a principle in psychology called differentiation that we can go into another time, where we stay connected to our own identity and values, our needs, instead of sort of morphing into this sort of one unit that often two people will do together. And when we work on this, we have more awareness of where we begin and end and where our partner begins and ends. And it actually helps attraction. It's something that we can talk more about another time. And full transparency, part of the reason why I shot this episode before getting back to some of the self-worth topics more broadly is because I have found it pretty destabilizing dating again. A lot of issues that I thought I had worked through in therapy are getting kicked up. But I am trying to see it as a growth experience. But it can be really destabilizing. So I want us to have compassion for ourselves. And there might be times where you really do need to take some time off. So it's all really dependent on what you need at that moment. I would love to hear your thoughts. As always, in the comments on YouTube is usually the best place to get in touch. And just as a note, in case you don't know this podcast is available on YouTube. It is also available on Spotify, Apple, and many other players if you prefer to listen on the go instead of in a video player. And we should be posting on social media soon. All of those links are down below. Within the next 2 weeks, hopefully we'll be posting on Instagram little clips, so you can find us there. And if you found this episode helpful, you might enjoy part 1 and 2 on limerence, which is about obsessive crushes and fantasy and when you can't stop thinking about someone. Or you might enjoy our self-worth and self-esteem series that we've been doing. All of that is linked down below as well. Speak with you next week. The topic will be on identity and how we view ourselves and the ego. And really excited to get into that with you all then and speak to you next Sunday morning.